The Downs used to be famous as a landscape of freedom, a place where you could walk without let or hindrance, with only the music of skylarks above your head and the scent of thyme at your feet. You could walk the Downs from end to end in freedom. You could do so because the high Downs were covered by a singular mantle, a coat of many colours, a precious fabric of fenceless ancient down pasture, bejewelled by tiny flowers and grasses, humming with the tiny busyness of bees, butterflies and grasshoppers. This mantle draped and protected the marks left by the ancient peoples, their burial mounds, field lynchets and hill forts. It was a landscape where the interests of farming were in rough harmony with the interests of nature and the interests of people to freely delight in it. In the last century, the ancient mantle of soft sheepwalks has been ploughed and shattered on the Brighton Downs into some 180 fragments, most of which are below 10 acres in size. It is a landscape of freedom no longer. Brighton, however, is singularly fortunate in that the majority of its downland, some 13,000 acres, is owned by the people of Brighton through our City Council, or by the National Trust and other social landowners. Yet the restorative potentials of this huge public resource have been continually thwarted by secretive council managements which have primarily used our downland as a second-rate source of rental income, in cahoots with the commercial interests of the tenant farmers. Most of the Brighton Downland estate is wholly unknown to most Brighton people. This film is a small attempt to reveal the big secret of what we own and what should be our common delight. We must remake our landscape of freedom. We start at the west end of Brighton's Downland with Mile Oak, Paythorn and New Barn farms, which have been in public ownership since the 1880s, when they were bought to protect Brighton's water supply. The majority of Mile Oak Farm is now ploughland, and chalk grassland has been reduced to fragments on steep slopes, little used by walkers. Its prehistoric field systems were ploughed out after 1947. Paythorn Farm is a partial success story for Brighton's management. Remote and tranquil, it has two ancient down pasture fragments which were stitched back together in wider restored pastures and made public access land upon a change in the tenancy. New Barn Farm converted its widespread arables to pasture after the householders of Hangleton Valley found their homes awash with a brown flood of earth and rainwater from the farm's exposed autumn ploughlands in the heavy rains of October 1987. Yet the gorgeous east slope of Mount Zion still suffered further damage from chemical sprays in subsequent years. Even the long paths to the dike along the ridges were ploughed out, as were their adjacent gorse thickets. The farm remains suspended halfway between the old agribusiness ways and a new, restored public downscape. Waterhall Farm and Waterhall ex-golf course sit on the footprint of ancient wild sheep walks, though much has been lost to invasive thorn scrub and arable through the last century. Waterhall ex-golf course's chalk grassland is rich in wildlife despite its long dereliction, and the new rewilding project is a point of great hope, though it will require closely managed grazing and scrub control. Waterhall Farm also has much scrub encroachment, in this encouraged by the tenants' commitment to pheasant and partridge shooting, for pheasants are a woodland bird. They love to eat adders and downland mini-beasts. Pangdean Bottom is one of Brighton's best kept secrets. Only a quarter mile from the roaring A23 London Road, it is both grand and tranquil. Hares love it. The core of its scrub is old, with hazel, dogwood and wayfaring tree. Yet its down pasture has been lost to woodland, now filled with a giant pheasant release pen, and ploughed and fragmented into shrinking glades and small rectangles between new game bird scrub cover. It evokes both delight and sadness. There is a corridor of down pasture all the way from Waterhall Cottages to New Timber Hill, but Waterhall Farm's shooting business is an obstacle to opening this natural corridor to public access. Patcham Court Farm was a triumph for the post-war plough and bulldozer, till the farm was taken in hand by Brighton Council and relet on much more favourable terms for nature, archaeology and people. Most of the farm is now statutory access land and grazed in wide cattle pastures. The tiny patches of chalk grassland and old scrub in Deep Bottom and New Bottom have responded greatly to the new pastoralism. Bethany, Devil's Bit scabious and harebells are doing fine. Fenceless and wide, it feels something like the old downs, all sky and green rolling openness. Only the mad roar of traffic on the Brighton bypass damages your exhilaration. On Takedown Hill you can still make out the rim of the ring barrow and the low tumps of two old round barrows. Down the western slope the bony ribs of prehistoric field linchets have nodding scabious blooms. Meadow pipits rise in front of you. Standing Farm feels more remote than it is, for its winding valley cuts out the bypass noise. Its ancient pasture finally went in post-war bulldozing. The farm is plagued with game birds and does not welcome you like neighbouring Stanmer Park. Sheep are back on some of its higher ground. Will the wildlife return too? High Park Farm, Stanmer Park, Plumpton Hill. High Park Farm is a place where you may still see hares at dawn or hear the wailing notes of the stone curlew at night. There's been good work creating a new corridor of access land all the way from Stanmer Woods via Big Bottom to Ditchling Beacon. Too much of Big Bottom has been drenched with chemicals and lost to scrub for it to be the heavenly place it was a century ago, but it is still lovely. We won't linger on Stanmer Park, for it is no secret, but its highlands up at Saxon Piddingworth still feel more remote. At Marquee Brow, the work done to restore the flowers and insects of the old downs has borne good results. Plumpton Hill's dramatic scarp slope come to us as part of the old Stanmer estate lands. It is part of an SSSI. Its deep bostel, its heights topped with a Bronze Age barrow, and its 3 sheltered combes are a place of beauty and peace. Hollingbury Hill, Wild Park, Patchway Pastures. Housing now surrounds Hollingbury Hill on all sides except northwards. Its height can be seen all across the distant downs. Its birds have been monitored for many decades. In springtime its Iron Age hill fort is graced with early purple orchids. At night its dark places, away from the glare of artificial lighting, light up with glowworms like stars in the grass. The glowworms shine too in the Wild Park, now separated by modern woodland from Hollingbury Hill Fort, though they were united in one great sheep walk for a millennia and more. The Wild Park was a victim to older ways of seeing our down pasture heritage, for its founders in 1925 mistakenly thought that the grassland needed no management. Thus was much of its openness and visibility needlessly lost, and with that its unsupervised safety for children's play. Much good work of restoration has gone on recently, but not enough to secure the future of all its down pasture fragments. Its butterflies have been famous since Victorian times. Ditchling Road's ridge pastures have been restored from arable in recent years with public access. Here you may sit and watch the clouds and the cows and the returning flowers on Bare slopes where chasing shadows skim, as Kipling wrote. The sward gets richer in flowers year on year. The cows do their work well. Balmer and Housestein farms. Balmer Farm is on the highest, most remote and tranquil of our downs. It was once a medieval hamlet and church, and the patterns of its old green and house platforms and its medieval open fields still part survive. It's a tragic place, for its huge sheep walks have long been ploughed out. Waterpit Hill, Balmer Hough, Buckland Bank, Balmer Down. There were 2 Iron Age villages high up on Balmer Down, with an urn cemetery in between. It is still a wild place. Just before this scene was filmed, a short-eared owl flew up from a tussock, wintering away from her cold northern moors. In winter, too, the lines of gorse and thorn along the tall banks of its prehistoric fields host mixed flocks of finches, chaffinch, yellowhammer, goldfinch, linnet, corn bunting. Some parts of the farm are a total secret to Brighton folk. Moose Stone, commemorating the same Saxon leader as the name Molescombe, is still lovely, though very derelict. Broadshackles, too, still has the old Downland herbs, though much reduced by neglect. The southern portion of Ashcombe Bottom, though part of a nationally designated SSSI, has lost its nightingales and warblers now. Housestein Farm straddles the roaring A27. Historically, it too had large sheep walks. All are now gone. New barn was built to service the new cornfields which had replaced the ancient sheep pastures. Falmercourt Farm, Brightpn Downs, and Loose Bottom. Falmercourt Farm's giant thatched barn and farmhouse was sold off in another painful council mistake. On Court Lane, its gigantic field, these flint tools were found when this scene was filmed. 3 scrapers, a serrated blade, a damaged leaf-shaped arrowhead, and 2 flakes. Loose Bottom was not named after a tummy upset. Loose was the old Saxon word for a stock enclosure, and there are 2 such ancient monuments here. They're both marked by the presence of the rare wild burnet rose with its creamy flowers. Loose Bottom was a playground for the children of East Brighton until the big post-war plough-ups destroyed all but its steepest slopes. On those lovely slopes you may still find many rare species. A great opportunity to make progressive changes was lost several years ago when the farm was broken up and re-let. The children of East Brighton will still find the gates locked if they dare the busy roads to walk here. Bevendeen's woody slopes and high pastures, mostly part of Upper Bevendeen Farm, or livery small holdings, are a delight. Swifts, swallows, martins, skylarks, meadow pipits, noctule and serotine bats forage above your head on summer evenings. The largest, most handsome fly in Britain has its home here on the dung heaps, the hornet robber fly. Large parts of the valley slopes are within the Bevendeen Valleysides Local Nature Reserve. The Warham Road Bridge is threatened by 2 housing developments. The racecourse landscape, Whitehawk Hill and Sheepcot Valley. The racecourse landscape was made famous by the horse racing Prince Regent. Size for size, Whitehawk Hill has greater public value for wildlife, history, prehistory and cultural importance than any other Brighton Downland site. Its Stone Age causewayed camp is one of only 10 such upstanding monuments in Britain. That compares to some 1,500 Iron Age hill forts or some 660 Neolithic long barrows. It has its very own Whitehawk soldier beetle, more archaic meadow fungi than any other Brighton site, and 220 more recorded plants than any other equivalent area in Sussex. It has had free community access for the whole of recorded history. It has been a sacred site for over 5,000 years. Yet still it is plagued by 3 proposals for housing development on its ground. Why? Because it is in Brighton's East End, with painful levels of local deprivation. If the people of Whitehawk and East Brighton get a raw deal, you can be sure that its ancient Downland will get a raw deal too. Sheepcote Valley is a wild place. Come here if you want to hear skylark music, or if you want to see summer slopes dusted blue with bellflowers like an alpine meadow. Yet this place was a municipal tip for half a century and more. It is a place of hope and restoration. The Brightpn Downs. Mount Pleasant is a modern name for an ancient place, but pleasant it still is. The Sussex rampion still blooms on this surviving tag of old chalk grassland, and a flock of linnets twitters above. You may find the sweetly scented night flowering catchfly on the set-aside field edges, encouraged by the national park. In winter, the rooks fly ragged up Wick Bottom to their winter roost in Warren Plantation by the lawn cemetery. They climb high and tumble low in their dusk bedtime ritual. Some of its ancient inhabitants have now gone. The survey this summer found not a single surviving glowworm site between Racehill and Rottingdean, the Cliffs and Woodingdean. From Ovingdean's church, we look northwards up Wick Bottom past the sprawling modern sheds of Ovingdean Grange Farm. Mistaken policies allowed its spread to the size of an industrial estate, which is now at risk from more housing development. Yet a proposal for a community-based farm business, when the farm was last let, was rejected by Brighton's estates management. Newbarn Farm and Pickers Hill Farm are modern farms of arable tillage and temporary pastures that had lost most of their ancient sheep walks even 150 or 200 years ago. Such tillage is the backbone of our food supply, but there is too little of benefit to us in its present form. Farms such as these, close to the urban fringe and our food markets, would be best served through new forms of community engagement. The big community farms at Plawhatch and Tablehurst, up by Forest Row, give us good models for community control and retail agriculture, conservation and public pleasures. Castle Hill, Ballsdean Farm. Here, at Castle Hill, is the only place on the whole of the Brightpn Downs estate where the old Downs pasture ecosystem survives at a landscape scale. That hill, however, is only one part of the slopes of Newmarket Bottom, Bullock Down, Falmer Bottom, Standine and Ballsdean, winding southwards where we can see glimpses of sea and white chalk cliff between the hills. Protected by their steepness and their age-long history of sheep grazing, they are a treasure trove of rare and beautiful life forms. You may find the walk-biter bush cricket, the great green bush cricket, or the stripe-winged grasshopper. You may find early spider orchis, Nottingham catchfly, autumn ladies' tresses orchis, or sheets of fragrant orchids. You'll notice that the gorse and thorn runs round the upper slopes like a monk's tonsure, leaving the crowns of the hills bare. That is the only jarring note in this otherwise intact scene. On the hilltops, right up until recent times, there was a mixture of bonny purple heather, blazing gorse, and both chalkland and heathy plants. Only that part of this landscape's ecosystem is lost. The valley lands were probably always cornlands, and were an essential part of the old downland economy of sheep and corn. Look well, because you are looking at what the whole of the Brightpn Downs would have looked like at the time our first downland was purchased by Brighton Council in the 1880s. Look well, because this is what we have lost on the rest of our Brightpn Downs estate since then. It is an ecosystem which feeds us and which supports a multitude of species equal to that of tropical rainforest. It is our very own rainforest in miniature. It is an ecosystem which allows us the freedom to wander once again, without let or hindrance, for the time beneath our feet needs our footsteps to survive. In our lives of labour and noise, pollution and worry, this is the landscape of freedom that all of us so dearly need.